Today's reading comes from Matthew 2, 1-12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. The word of the Lord.
You can be seated. Well, I'm excited today that we have a guest preacher who's passing through the city. And whenever we have guest preachers passing through the city, we love to say, "Hey, we got a pulpit for you." We're pleased to have Pastor Esau McCaulley in the house. Esau is somebody you might have heard of. He's written columns for the New York Times. He's a public theologian, writer, speaker. But he and Drew go way back, because it seems like everybody goes way back with Drew. And they were, I think, roommates at Gordon Conwell. I think Esau schooled Drew in the ways of Madden. But they have a rich relationship, and it's just been such a gift to me, even just this morning, just seeing his love for the scriptures, his love for the church, and his desire to help people experience the love of Jesus in powerful and transformational ways. He's 7 months into a church plant into the Chicago area, so we're just so grateful that he can give some of his time to be out here with us today and open up the scriptures. So would you join me in welcoming Pastor Esau?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I've known Drew since 2002, I think it was. And he said, anytime you come through New York, you have a free place to stay. So me and my daughter were coming to New York City, and he said, you can stay. It's called The Hub. Y'all know about The Hub? So I was staying there, but then he said, while you're here, will you preach for us? And so now I'm here. So thank you all so much for having me. A few days before Christmas, I woke up, and because we're in between the seasons, our house was a mess. And my kids had stayed up late eating snacks and everything. So there was stuff all over the floor. And I said to my oldest, go get the vacuum and let's vacuum up this place. But our vacuum, as it often did, was broken, and I got frustrated. We needed a new vacuum, but I had this idea, and y'all don't know me, so don't judge me, okay? I had this idea. It was a few days before Christmas. I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I could get a vacuum for my wife for Christmas, and I could also have a new vacuum for myself. And so I go to her and I say, beloved, I was trying to play it off. Is there a vacuum that you like? I tried to make it a normal conversation. She said, yes, there is. It's at Costco, and I'm going to go get it right now. So she knew that I had this Christmas plan. Because I think that she had this idea that I wasn't going to get out of a Christmas present. I don't know if you've ever had one of these things happen to you where you get a gift for your birthday or for Christmas or for your anniversary, and you ask this question, who is this gift actually for? Or maybe you've had a holiday coming and you're expecting a gift to come from someone who you care about, and they completely forgot about it. And I know that this discussion of gifts and holidays and the inevitable analogies of Jesus may seem dated, because today is January the 4th, and Christmas is over, right? We've done our Christmas thing. But I'm actually from the Anglican church, and in the Anglican church, we're snobs. And so that means we don't actually start celebrating Christmas until December the 25th, We actually celebrate Christmas for how long? Y'all know how long Christmas season is? How long is it? Thank you, sorry. I've got to tell you all, there's black people in my church, and in black churches, we talk to each other, okay? So when I ask you a question, you can say it. So I think you know. How many days are there in Christmas, everybody? 12, exactly. And if you add 12 to 25, you get to January the 6th. Christmas season ends on January the 6th, which is called the Feast of the Epiphany, the Feast of the Appearing, and it celebrates the coming of the Magi, the three men from the east to worship Jesus. That signals the end of Christmas season and the beginning of a new season. Anybody have Christmas trees still up? This is when you take your Christmas tree down. See, if you still have yours up, you're still right on schedule. Now, since January the 6th this year falls, I think, on a Tuesday, it is appropriate to move it up a couple of days early and celebrate it today on January the 4th. In Epiphany, the visit of the three Magi is important because it answers a central question about Christianity and the gospel. This gift that we have in Jesus, who exactly is it for? Just Israel or the entirety of the world? Because the Christmas story begins focused primarily on the people of Israel. You have Jesus and his family and his extended family surrounding the birth of the child. And then there's another group that shows up. Anybody know the other group who shows up? You all know? Shepherds? Can you say shepherds? Okay, you guys are going to kill me today. Shepherds. So the shepherds actually come to see Jesus on the day that he's born. And I think that there's often a lot of conversation as to who these shepherds are, what they represent. Why are the shepherds there? The shepherds, in a sense, represent just the people who are available. You would imagine that normally you would have the rich or the wealthy who would come to see the baby Jesus, but the rich and the wealthy, they're inside. And you have this huge angelic host of people who show up to celebrate the baby Jesus. And you know the kind of person who can see an angelic host? People who work outside. My first trip to New York City actually was in part sponsored by Drew. I was broke in college, not in college, in seminary. And we needed a place to have our honeymoon. We got married on December the 19th. And Drew said, I have a brother who lives in Greenwich Village. You can stay at his place during your honeymoon. And so we came to New York. And I'm a small town boy from Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm not gonna lie to you all, the big city was a little bit too much for me. And so after actually only about 3 or 4 days, I decided I don't want to spend Christmas in New York. I want to go home. And so we found ourselves driving from New York City back to where we lived in Vermont, and we got hungry. But it was Christmas Eve, and there was only one place that was open to give us food. Does anybody know what food that would have been? Anyone say Chinese food? Yes, Chinese food. And we stopped to eat Chinese food on New Year's Eve. And you know why we had Chinese food that day? Because those were the people who were available, who were up late at night, working where everybody else was at home, feasting and resting. Who then do the shepherds represent in the Christian story? The shepherds represent the kinds of people who work at night. The kind of people who we don't think about. The person who tries to get your Uber at 11 o'clock in the morning at night because you wanted some food. Or the person who drives you to and from the airport early in the morning. The shepherds are the ordinary people. But if that is the case, then who are these magi who come to see the baby Jesus, and why are they important? We know a few things about them. It says that these magi came from the east, and they asked the question, who is this person who's been born of the King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. Can I teach you all for a moment? My other job is when I'm not pastoring, I teach. So I'm going to do some teacher stuff. Is that okay? So you guys say yes. Okay, look at this progress. Look at this. We're going to get it done. Okay. So the Magi were, in that time, something like astrologers / astronomers / priest. I don't know if you all have these people in New York City, like the tarot card readers, or the people who can, like, if you go to their house and they talk about the energy, you know what I'm talking about? So these are the kinds of people who could look at these signs and tell you the future. And there's actually in the Bible an explicit prohibition in the book of Deuteronomy that says, do not do this. I'll read it for you. Let there be no one among you who sacrifices their son or their daughter in the fire. Don't sacrifice your kids. That's a good call. Still keep doing that. Don't do that, sorry. Let no one practice divination or who interprets omens or engages in witchcraft. And so the Bible says very clearly, don't do this. And it's easy for us, and I want to come off on pro-witchcraft here. So I'm anti-witchcraft, but understand this. There are people who are looking for answers. The world is confusing to them. They're looking for anyone who can explain to them what's happening. Maybe they're sick. Maybe there's a woman who's pregnant and she wants to know, is my child going to be okay? Maybe there's someone who's in love who wants to know, is my relationship going to work? I was reading about this story online where they said that you can put your don't do this, but you can put your text into ChatGPT. You heard about this? And you can put the relationship text in there, and then ChatGPT can read like the text that you sent to and from your significant other and give you advice on how to better communicate. Now that may seem crazy, but it also is related to people who are desperate to find love. So these people who are looking at the stars, it could be a sign of intentional rebellion against God, but it could also be a sign of confusion. I have friends who I grew up with who were raised in the church like I was, and they've joined different cults. One of them is a black Hebrew Israelite. Y'all got this in New York City? Okay. And you kind of go, why would you do that? And trust me, once again, don't do that. But why were they drawn to it? They were drawn to it because they were experiencing suffering and injustice, and when their ethnic identity was made less of, and they're trying to figure out what does it actually mean to be a black person in America, and it was looking to someone for answers. So these magi are wrong to look to the stars for answers. But sometimes people are trying to find God, and they're just flailing about. Have you ever talked to your friend who is like fake deep and spiritual? And he's 95% wrong, but you say, this one little part is actually correct, right? And so it's easy for us to condemn it, but maybe you can say, how can I take this little bit of truth that they have and direct them to God? So God meets these magi where they are. And there's so much stuff to say here I wish I had all day. He doesn't say, oh, because you're from a different culture, and in your culture you worship stars, you just keep worshiping the stars. No, he doesn't do that. He takes them from where they are to Jesus. See, the star isn't actually the sign, right? The star the star isn't the thing. The star points them to the thing itself. And here's the even more complicated part of it. The Bible does say the heavens declare the glory of God. You're supposed to be able to look up into the stars and see in the stars a God of power and glory and truth. So they were looking at the stars as God told them to, but they were getting the wrong answers. They had to learn. One more thing about the Magi. Can I talk about the Magi a little bit more? Say yes. Okay, more about the Magi. Where are they actually from? We don't know. There's two options. One of them is Egypt. They could have come from Egypt. The other one is from Babylon, which is modern-day Iraq or Iran. And in either case, we don't know which one it is. We know that in both cases, if it's Egypt or Babylon, there was a long history of Jewish presence there. In the Bible, there's an entire book called Daniel that speaks to the faithfulness of the Jewish people in exile in Babylon. I hope you see the whole of the redemptive narrative that's about to unfold here. This is the good part. Don't lose this part. So, hundreds of years before these magi are born, the Jewish people are there in Babylon. And because of their faithfulness in exile, year after year, generation after generation, there was an echo of a story of a king. That they knew that there was some guy in Jerusalem who might one day be important to the world. How could a Babylonian know that except for the fact there were faithful Jews there? I want to say this about the city of New York. This is it, right? You have friends who have like the echo of a memory of a story. There's something about this guy named Jesus that my grandmother told me about that is still a part of who I am. The very fact that these magi who come to Jerusalem are testimony to the importance of faithfulness after generation, after generation, after generation. Now, the other thing that we do not know is whether or not an individual Jewish person comes to these magi and tell them about the Messiah. Maybe these three magi, even though they are wealthy and empowered and who have a high point in society, maybe they were friends with some poor Jewish folks who hung out with them and told them about the king of the world. We know the story of the Magi because of the long faithfulness of people under an oppressive regime. When I was in college, I took a vacation from faith. Not real, like, robust intellectual doubt. I was raised in the church, and I got to college and wanted to do something else for a little bit. And I had a friend of mine who was on the football team with me, who, and since I was Christian, I knew what he was doing. He was being nice to me so he could evangelize me later. And he got to this point right before Christmas, our junior year, where he invited me, like, do you want to come to Bible study? And I could tell he was nervous because I used to be in the church. He's like, you want to come to Bible study? And I said, nope. And I walked away. What Chris didn't know and what I didn't know was over the course of that Christmas break, I would have a profound encounter with God. And when I came back from the holidays, I was looking for a place to attend worship. And I would go to that Bible study he invited me to, and I'll meet my wife there. My mom, throughout my entire childhood, from elementary to middle to high school, drugged me to church, and half the time I didn't want to go. And I stand here today in part because of Chris and in part because of my mom, who made the effort to witness to Jesus to me. Now, I can tell you Chris's name. I can tell you my mom's name. We don't know who the Magi's the people who spoke to them were. We do know that somebody's testimony in Babylon matters. I want to say this to you. That means that your testimony right here, the people who you serve and who you live amongst now, it actually matters. So these Magi hear this story, and they go to Jerusalem. Now, of course, it would make sense to them to say, okay, the king of Israel is born. The place that it makes the most sense to go to will be Jerusalem. So even though these magi have heard something of the Christian faith, we all know they don't, well, the Jewish faith at this point, we all know at this point they don't have it correct. They go to the wrong place. When I joined that small group Bible study, it was all white. I integrated it. And they said, you're black. Well, they didn't say this. They effectively thought this. You like hip hop, which they knew about. We're going to give you DC Talk's album, Jesus Freaks. This is only for a certain generation. You're not going to be old enough to remember this. But in no shade, if DC Talk family and friends are here, no shade to them. I'm sure they blessed a lot of people. Y'all know DC Talk, or am I too old for this? Okay, the three of you who know it. Okay. For the rest of you under 40, let me explain. It was like a rock band. I think two of them were white and one of them was black. But the weird part was the white guy was the rapper, not the black guy. And they gave me this album, and I was like, I don't know who these people are rapping for, but it's not for me. It was the wrong music. I grew up on Outkast, Wu-Tang Clan, Nas. That was like my genre. DC Talk was not that. These magi hear about a king, and they assume that he's going to be in a palace. So they go to Herod. Herod finds out about this, and he's deeply troubled. The Bible even says that the man was terrified about the arrival of the Magi. Are y'all scared of anything, or y'all like about that life? I'm gonna let you in on one of my childhood fears. Can y'all not judge me? This is a safe place. I don't know y'all, so don't tell anybody. Are you recording this? Edit this part out. Pause. I'm just kidding. You can keep doing it. You can keep doing it. So when I was a kid, there was this thing called the Incredible Hulk. It was like we were broke, so we got basic cable. And so we had to get the old, they don't even know what basic cable is. Don't worry about it. It's like Netflix was like 2 options. I'm trying to explain this to you all. Basic cable. Anyways, so there was this show called Incredible Hulk, and it's from the 70s, and it was one of the 3 things that was on every day, so I would watch it. And Incredible Hulk is like, he would go from city to city, and he would try to fight crime, but if you made him mad, he turns into the green monster. So in the dream that I have in my neighborhood, which is kind of a rough neighborhood, we would be playing basketball with Incredible Hulk. And the thing was, we would say to everybody, when the Incredible Hulk drives to the lane, whatever you do, don't foul the Incredible Hulk. But the Incredible Hulk would drive to the lane every single time, and somebody would foul him super hard, and then he turns into a monster, and he tries to kill us all. So I would run every single time. Right before he called me, I'd wake up. And so I grew up with this tremendous phobia of Incredible Hulk. Herod sees or hears about this prophecy about a king. And Herod is afraid. And Herod could adjust his behavior. Don't foul the Incredible Hulk. Don't fight against it. But Herod decides that he is going to try to murder Jesus. Let me just say a little bit about this part. Herod, in his arrogance, finds himself fighting against God. And he can't stop God. All he can actually do is do tremendous damage to the people around him. Because of Herod's arrogance, lots of innocent families suffer tremendous loss. And I don't want to be flippant about like some of the intellectual questions that we have about God. They're important. But you understand that it's not like 2 human beings who are arguing with one another, and the winner of that argument wins the God fight. There's actually either a God in heaven or there isn't a God in heaven. Either all of this stuff that we see, feel, hold, and touch came from nothing and it's returning to nothing, or there's a God who orders the affairs of humankind. Either there's a God who cares about us and loves us, or we are orphans. And the answer to that question is incredibly important, and the stakes are incredibly high. And we have to actually ask ourselves, let's imagine for a second, God comes down in glory to judge the living and the dead. What kind of argument that we heard actually makes sense in the light of his appearing? Are we actually I think about this a lot, maybe because I have nothing else to do. I doubt, let's assume God exists for a moment. He's sitting up in heaven, Gabriel's there beside him, and Michael. And he's like, man, did you read that book that just came out last week that says that don't exist? That's a really good argument. We need to have a committee meeting to figure out how to respond to this book. Let's inspire Tim Keller to write something. No, that's not what happens, right? God is utterly comfortable in his existence. But Herod finds himself fighting against God. It's a place we don't want to be. But our magi actually hear the truth, that they're in the wrong place. The star leads them to Bethlehem. And once again, we're learning something about the God that we serve. Not a God who's only available to those who live in fancy palaces, but God is actually to be found in an ordinary home, in an ordinary part of town, in the out of nowhere city or town of Bethlehem. Don't you think part about the star that gets so much credit and all of the writing and all the other things is the star leads them to Bethlehem, but then its work is done. What actually matters is what happens when the nations arrive at Bethlehem. And here you see the fulfillment of Scripture, where it says in Isaiah chapter 60, nations will come to your light and kings to the brightness of your dawning. The arrival of the Magi represent the arrival of the nations to worship the King. There's another one in Psalm 72, verse 10. This is where we get the song, Read Thee Kings. This is why they're called kings. They're reading all of these passages in the Bible in light of the coming of these magi. May the kings of Tarshish and of distant shores bring tribute to him. May the kings of Sheba and Seba present him gifts. That's the reason why there's always one black magi. Because they read Psalm 72 and said the king of Sheba is coming to bring them gifts. There are lots of meanings we could attach to the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, but we will not do that because we've got other stuff to do. But here's what we can say. These three gifts are the things that are appropriate to give to a king. How odd it must have been for these magi to leave the opulence of Herod's palace and find themselves worshiping at an ordinary home. And maybe that's the point. The gospel does not, let me be clear about this. The gospel does not exclude the rich. The magi had enough money to go from Babylon all the way to Bethlehem, and they had enough money to give the king gold. But they do have to leave their places of comfort to meet the child. It does not ignore the wealthy, but it does not center them. They have to do what everybody has to do, which is worship the king. So the Magi do. They are the Gentiles who come from far beyond the boundaries of Israel to worship the King, Jesus. And in doing so, they paved the way for every nation to do the same. We planted our church in Naperville, Illinois. And by the way, you may not know this, but you all are giving money to us, so thank you. Thank you for the money. Keep it flowing. Should have put that in the sermon earlier. Anyways, when we planted our church, one of the core values that we put into our church was the idea that we wanted to be a multi-ethnic community. And we did so not because we were chasing some kind of like fad, but because that's what the gospel does, right? It draws people from every tribe, tongue, and nation to worship the King. And a church that actually looks like its city is a living parable of the gospel. Hope Midtown looks like the Magi coming to worship Jesus, because that is what the gospel is for. Let me say this. Then I'll stop. Normally in the Anglican church, we do Eucharist after this. I don't know what y'all going to do next. We'll figure that out later. We live in a particular moment in our culture where there is this tension and this desire to pull us apart and to turn us on one another and to see the foreigner as an enemy and not a friend. But in the Church of Jesus Christ, we've always been the kind of people who says to anybody, no matter where you come from, come and worship our Savior. And I pray that this will always be true of our people here at Hope Midtown.